Well, hello. Thanks for coming by to do a tour of my Japan apartment. Come on in. And over 800,000 views later, I've made a few upgrades. Come inside and let's check them out. Welcome back. And of course, first thing when you come in my house, at least, take off your shoes. So put these away here and I'm gonna show you what's changed since the last video. So in my original video, I had done a complete tour of my Japan apartment and I talked about the features of the apartment as well as some of the challenges with this apartment. So if you haven't seen that video, be sure to click the link in the description below. But this really, at least the original video, represents, I think, what is pretty typical of a small Japanese apartment from sort of the basic range to the middle range. And one of the biggest things with these apartments is space because they're generally quite small. And some of the feedback that I received in that video was really the idea of going vertical in terms of storage. And so you can see that I've addressed that here from the original video with this storage rack. And it is the Broer rack from IKEA. So it is roughly 190 centimeters tall or just over 6 feet tall. And one of the nice things about it is that it has my new oven. And so this was something that wasn't in the original video. I had talked about how much I really wanted to get a replacement for my microwave oven, mainly because the oven is old and I just wanted some versatility in terms of the type of food I can make because typically Japanese apartments and homes don't come with ovens. So I got this in May of this year, just a few months after I made the original video, and this has changed things dramatically. Just the ability to heat food quickly and then make different types of food. This has really been a huge upgrade to the kitchen. I know many of you had mentioned an air fryer, and I definitely heard it, and it is certainly on my list. The challenges with an air fryer is that there is only one outlet on this side of the kitchen, so it makes it very difficult to use it, and I can't extend it over to the counter here. And right here below where I'm pointing is the other outlet. So it would be a little bit impractical to use an air fryer. Overall, this rack has really been helpful as well. So as you can see, I have 3 additional storage tiers, which I did not have. The original setup was just the microwave sitting on top of this refrigerator with a couple of storage baskets. But here I've got these storage baskets, mesh storage baskets, and what's nice about them is that I can actually see the different items that are stored there, so it's very easy to access them. But then also I've got some additional storage here for the less frequently used items, so that's really helpful as well. So overall, this has really been a big upgrade to this kitchen, just giving me so much more flexibility and just really functionality as well. The other thing too to note, because I know it's going to come up, is that I did anchor this rack to the wall. So as many of you know, Japan is in an earthquake zone, and so to prevent the potential for tipping with this rack, it is anchored to the wall or just even functioning in this kitchen every day. Sort of if you happen to knock something, that the rack doesn't come crashing down, especially with this heavy oven on it, as well as many of the items that are stored on top of it. So one of the other things that I had addressed as well was the sink, and this was really something that was a big challenge for me in terms of having functional space on the counter. So I found this rack here. It is a dish rack from IKEA, or for some people IKEA, and this has been a huge upgrade as well. As you can see, it sits high above the sink, and so it's easy to function and wash dishes and prepare things. And then it has some modularity in terms of the types of dishes it can support. So that's really nice as well. And also it gets the dish rack off the counter where I had it previously, and that really took up a lot of space on the countertop, making preparing food very difficult, or just again having additional clutter on the countertop and making it difficult to function here. So moving on, some additional upgrades that I made to this kitchen are just some convenience items for storage. And so for example, I've got this rack that sits under my cabinet, and I don't really use it for much because I don't want to put glass items there. They might sort of slide out and onto the floor and break. But for plastic items or items that don't fit on the dish rack when I'm drying it, I use this right here, and it's really convenient just to have some additional storage whenever I need it. Same situation here. This is really functional for me. So here I've got honey and tea stored, and this is great because I use both of these items quite frequently, and instead of them using up all the space, or at least taking up a good amount of the space inside the cabinets, it's just really nice to be able to have something very easy to access that doesn't take up space inside the cabinet, especially since I use these items almost on a daily basis. And then this is again another key upgrade, and this is this pegboard, also from IKEA, and it is quite versatile because you can use it in your garage or your office. In this case, I've used it in the kitchen here, and it installs really easily as well. So it hooks right under my range, which is great. And then as you can see, I've got various pots and pans here as well as cookware. And so this is great because it prevents me from having to reach under the cabinet to be able to get pots and pans, especially the ones that I use most frequently, but then just even giving me some additional storage room under the cabinet, because there I can leave the pots and pans as well as store food there or items that I don't use that frequently. So this has really been great, just the flexibility and convenience that this affords me here. So another addition to this kitchen, based on your feedback, is the addition of a spice rack. And that has also really proven to be very beneficial in terms of the convenience as it relates to preparing food in this kitchen, because now the spice rack, everything's located in one place. Again, it's not taking up cabinet space, and it really is something that also utilizes the space really well. So obviously, all right. You know what? We're just not going to do that. We're just going to put that back and just stand here and talk about the spice rack. So hold on one second. I'm going to pick these up. And now I got spices all over my floor. Great. So anyway, yeah. So here we are. Obviously, you know, maybe a little bit too much show and tell. I think I actually have some of this on my clothes too. Anyway, so back to it. So the spice rack has really been helpful in terms of preparing food, and then just storage and organization as well, because everything's in one place, and it's just made things so much easier. And obviously there's this narrow space next to my stove that's perfect for a spice rack, but just having everything in one place, the spice rack, the cooking oil, for example, and then just other sort of odds and ends, really just nice to have everything located in one place and not having to reach into the back of the cabinet, or you know, spending minutes looking for a particular spice. Really, all of these upgrades have just been so immensely helpful to this kitchen here. Now I have to go clean up this spice that I spilled all over the floor. So the next area that was really a big challenge for me was my kitchen cabinet. And if you recall from the previous video, or the original video, I suffered an injury because of this cabinet. Now, obviously I'm not blaming the cabinet, but it was not utilizing storage in the right way that led to an accident ultimately. So what we have here is a much better solution. So what I've done is I've got this sort of shelf right here that allows me to partition where the plates and bowls are stored, as well as storage containers. So that's super convenient because I'm able to maximize the space inside this cabinet, and then just a small space for glasses and other little items that I use on a day-to-day basis. And then the top shelf is just completely off limits because of the accident. So there's really rarely used items up there, and nothing heavy, because if you recall, that's where I took a strike from a heavy object, a metal cup, which led to a trip to the hospital. So here we are at ground level, and you're looking at my under sink storage. And if you remember the previous video, the organization, well, there really was no organization. It was cleaning supplies, infrequently used items, and tools. And as you can see here, there's a bit more organization now. You've got the cleaning supplies and infrequently used items. And so I put this rack in here, which has really given me sort of two different shelves to be able to store items. But then there's also sort of this low area here where I can put some flat items. And that's really made this cabinet much more functional, just giving me a lot more organization to put things away, especially the infrequently used items that don't have or didn't have much of a place. And so this has really been a big upgrade. This rack is from IKEA too, or IKEA, and so I'm really happy about having this solution in here. It's just changed this cabinet a lot and just makes it much easier to find things and just overall easier to work with in terms of keeping the kitchen clean or just whatever I need to keep the house clean. So in the previous video, I also showed you the under cabinet storage for pots and pans and just food items generally. And this has been another, what I would say, success in terms of just improving things overall. And so I first had this board custom cut. I don't know why the original board was not included with this cabinet, because there are some peg holes that allow you to adjust the shelf height, but for some reason the builder did not leave them in here. But that's okay. I had one cut and it's really been helpful. And as you can see here, I'm able to now get to pots and pans really easy just by sliding this in and out here. Fantastic. Just even items like this right here, like plastic lids or containers, just having a place to keep those organized. This little bin here is from IKEA also. Nice storage solutions. And then also, again, items that are infrequently used, and then food items, the big one, right? Just being able to get all of these things in this cabinet on a second shelf, out of the way, not taking up space in the upper cabinet, but then also not mixed in with the pots and pans on the lower cabinet. And I bought this sliding shelf right here from Amazon, and these have been great too, just to be able to get to food easily without having to reach in the back of the cabinet. So again, a huge upgrade for this kitchen, and just again making the kitchen more functional. So overall, these upgrades they may not seem like much, but in terms of being able to function in this kitchen, it has really been a huge improvement. It has made my ability to function in this kitchen every day. It's made the experience in this kitchen far more pleasant. And so again, thanks to your feedback, it's all possible. And I can't say it enough, just how much better it's made this kitchen. Even in terms of just the cleaning and upkeep, everything is so much better. So one of the topics I didn't cover in my previous video was my closet, and that's for good reason. Obviously, closets are very personal spaces, and the same holds true for mine, but also because this closet is really small. So here we are with the closet, and as you can see here, you've got the shirts up top and my pants down here. And this closet is roughly about 1 meter by half a meter, or 3 feet by roughly 30 inches. So it's a pretty small closet, and my suitcase is also in here, and that's useful because when I'm not traveling, this is where I store the suitcase, but also seasonally I put away my clothes in the suitcase so that there is some place for them to go when I'm not using them. Now, this rack here did not come with the apartment. It was something that I purchased from Amazon, and that's really helpful because the original setup of the closet had shelves, and that's really going to limit what I can do in terms of, one, the amount of clothes I can store, and then also how those clothes are stored. So this rack has been very helpful. I also store things like winter coats in the back as well. So I do have this upper shelf here that I can use to store things like blankets or items that I need to get to quickly. But generally, this space here isn't that functional. So this is really the extent of what I have. And then there is a sort of storage or sort of storage compartments that I've installed myself here. I won't show you that because things like my t-shirt and socks are here, but I have this also to organize many of the things that I use on a day-to-day basis. Overall, it is functional. I think for one person, it's fine, but if someone were living with a partner, for example, there just would not be enough storage in this apartment for two people. Even the apartment itself, given its size, would be very difficult for two people to function in. So this is really the layout that you have. I think if you're someone like myself that has a reasonable amount of clothing items, this apartment works. But if you're someone who has a lot of clothing, it's going to be a problem. You'd have to come up with some creative storage solutions to be able to handle excess clothing items in terms of storing, but then also making this work as effectively as possible to accommodate the different things and even being able to find it, because again, these clothes are packed together pretty tightly. So it can work, but definitely not something I would recommend if the idea is to live in this apartment with a partner. Now, I mentioned in the first video that there is a large closet in the front of the apartment, but there's a large water heater inside that closet. So unfortunately, because of the layout of this apartment, the builder or the management company decided to put the water heater there rather than allow that to be usable space. And the other option is to put the water heater outside, but I think in terms of the actual sort of installation and then integration into the plumbing, it would have been really challenging for them to be able to do all that. So they just opted to put it in the front closet. So now let's talk about the living room. Now, this room has not received many upgrades since the original video. If you recall the original video, I had a rack here in the corner, and that contained my network equipment, also my server as well. And since then, I've actually sold that equipment, and in place of it, I've gotten this firewall here, which is obviously a fraction of the size and doesn't take up any space. As you can see, it's mounted here under my desk, and it accomplishes all the same functions as my previous network gear. The nice thing about getting rid of that rack is that it's opened up the space in the corner where I can put a lot of my studio gear when I'm not using it. So as you can see here, I've got my microphone, and then I've got my studio lights. And so it's really been helpful just in terms of opening up this space, making it less cluttered. Now, admittedly, it's still not ideal. I should have a dedicated space for content creation and productivity, but this is a much greater improvement over what I had previously. And the desk even is also a beneficiary of these upgrades because now there's not as much clutter on the desk. So everything has really been simplified. Makes it much better to work in this space. So for now, given the size of this apartment, this works, but obviously I do need more room, more space to be able to keep things better organized and obviously be more productive in terms of the different spaces that I can work in. And you'll also see that the projector that I had previously is gone. I sold it with the goal of buying a 4K projector, but after doing some research, 4K projectors are quite large, and so I don't even know if I have the space to be able to accommodate something like that. So that's still to be determined. Admittedly, I do miss having a projector because you get that big screen. Another topic I got feedback on was about plants. I talked about how the lack of lighting in this apartment really made it difficult to keep plants, or at least for plants to thrive. And I got some feedback in terms of how to deal with that particular issue. Now, a couple of things have happened since the original video. First, I did contact the apartment management company and I asked them to prune the tree behind this apartment. They ended up cutting the tree down, unfortunately. The benefit is that I get a lot more lighting in this apartment. So recently I did reintroduce a plant back into this apartment about a month ago. So it's still pretty young, but so far it seems to be doing well. It looks really healthy. So it's good to get plants back into the apartment. Now, I'm just going to start with this one and see how it does throughout the winter. If it does well, then I will get more plants. The other question was around the balcony and whether I could do things with that. I could, I just haven't made that high on my priority list of things to address. So as it stands, the balcony remains the same. So now let's talk about my kitchen table. And this was also a noteworthy, I think, part of the tour, at least in terms of the feedback that I received. So there were suggestions about changing the type of table to give myself more space to move around this kitchen. So everything from a smaller table to even a square or rectangle type table. The table is fine, and I mention that quite frequently in the comments, one of the noteworthy comments, or at least several comments that I received, was about the possibility of having a folding table, a retractable table installed on this wall. And I'd replied that I would not do that because these walls, I really don't know what's behind them and how much of a load that they can bear. And given that I rent this apartment, I think to even if it could accommodate the load of such a table, I wouldn't want to go through the installation process to be able to do that because I think it would require heavy modification to the wall, and then obviously that might not sit well with my apartment management company. So as it stands, this table is going to be here. It really doesn't present any problems for me in terms of functioning in here day to day, especially with the new upgrades that I've made in this kitchen. The kitchen is far more functional now. So one of the questions I did want to address was around my sleeping area. It's not a bedroom, of course. Now, some of you noted that the pillows were at the foot of the bed in the original video. And that's because in the wintertime, this window is really drafty. It's not a double pane window, and I did add insulation tape to it, but there's still quite a strong draft that comes through that window. So in the winter months, I actually relocate the pillows to the foot of the bed and sleep there so that I don't freeze. So it's an unfortunate aspect of living in Japanese homes. Many of the homes are not well insulated, and so therefore you have to take some unconventional measures to stay warm during the winter months in this apartment. And one of those for me is sleeping at the foot of the bed so that I don't freeze under that window. So let's talk about accessibility. So that was a topic that came up in the previous video, and I didn't address accessibility at all, unfortunately. And in thinking about this video, just wanted to talk about accessibility as it relates to this apartment. Now, this apartment can be adapted for those with disabilities. And I say that is because my neighbor who just moved in here recently, apparently he has a disability, and there were some modifications made to the apartment to accommodate him. And there were really two things. One, the stairs, a railing was installed because he has difficulty with stairs. So that's one way it was addressed. Now for this apartment, similarly, the same thing could be done in terms of modifying the door or adding a ramp to the stairs in order for someone who doesn't handle stairs well to be able to get in and out of the apartment. Also, as I mentioned previously, my water heater is located in my front closet. When they were preparing the apartment for the new tenant, they actually moved the water heater outside to the balcony. And that was very interesting because that obviously frees up some space for the new tenant who may sort of either have some equipment that needs to go into that closet or just more functional space overall. I don't know specifically, but obviously some accommodations were made from an accessibility perspective. Now, the apartment, I would say reasonably, should be able to accommodate someone with disabilities. There's reasonable sort of space to pass back and forth in the apartment. My apartment is a little bit unique, so some of the things like the kitchen table would have to be cleared out, or even my bookshelf, for example, to make it easier, the ingress and egress around the apartment, as well as moving back and forth. But overall, I think this apartment has reasonable accommodations for those with disabilities. The one area of concern is the bathroom, though. And so whether modifications have to be made to the actual shower area so that someone can enter, because it is on a raised platform. And then there were questions around why I have so many shoes. So I'm not someone who is obsessed with shoes. The reason I have so many shoes here is because in Japan, men's shoes typically go up to size 10 in most stores, size 10 US. I wear size 11.5 US, and there are very few shoes available in that size here. So when I get the chance, if I'm traveling or through online purchases, I purchase as many shoes as possible, at least in terms of what suits my needs, so that I don't have issues with finding a shoe if, let's say, a shoe wears out or if it breaks or anything that might warrant a replacement. Also, you have situations where it's the type of occasion, whether it's a formal event, a business event. So I do have to keep a variety of shoes on hand because of the limitations in available shoe sizes here in Japan. So one additional topic I wanted to address that came up quite frequently in the original video was how much is the monthly rent? So the monthly rent for this apartment is about $400 US. I've been in this apartment for 5 years, over 5 years now, and the monthly rent has not increased in that time span. So that's, I think, a pretty reasonable value for this apartment. Where you do lose the value, though, is energy efficiency. The energy bills during the extreme months can be quite as high as roughly $225 monthly, and in a good month, you're at roughly $80 monthly. I'd say sort of during the less extreme seasons. So that's what you have here. And then there is also the convenience factor. I am 10 minutes away from the city center, so it is very easy to go to and from. And then I'm also a 5-minute walk from the train station, which is also a huge benefit to living here. So you have to consider those things in total. Overall, the apartment is, I would say, a mostly positive value, but for an apartment of this size, the energy bills are way too high. So 9 months ago when I made this video, I did not expect it to really attract the attention that it did. 800,000 views, as I mentioned earlier, was beyond my wildest expectations, but it was also a learning experience as well, how you saw my apartment and the opportunities you saw in order to make it more livable. And I read every one of those comments and definitely gave some thought to how I could improve this space. And with your feedback, it definitely made life much more functional in this apartment, just a much easier place to live. And so I really thank you for your interest, your time, and the feedback you provided, because it really has gone a long way to making this environment much better. Now, admittedly, it is not the ideal space. I have outgrown it, but it has certainly made it tolerable until I can determine my next move. I'd like to live in a house, but certainly given sort of the unique characteristics of Japanese homes, I'm not that fond of them, I should say. And hopefully next year at this time, I'll be talking to you from a new home that is much more suited to my preferences. So let me know what you think about these upgrades, and let me know if you have any questions about living in a Japanese apartment. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video soon.